Let's go over our 1.5 loader for Shima. So loaders in ComfyUI / Stable Diffusion are effectively the thing that loads the models and the LoRa stacks that you may have and those sorts of things, your prompts, etc., that set things up for passing off to the sampler, right, where the image actually gets produced. So in our loader, we have a bunch of different sections. We're just going to go over each one of them and what each set of nodes does within this template, okay? So in the upper left-hand corner, we have a latent producer. We have just an empty latent that gets made at the Stable Diffusion default size of 512 by 512. This is here to satisfy the requirement of, well, having a latent and giving you some ability here to customize it, right? So that if you aren't using a control net, you can use this to set up your initial image size and whatnot that it's going to use to build its latent image from. Now, it's red, and this is because in Shima we have a few of these red nodes where they're called sacrificial nodes, right? If you are using a control net setup, then your latent will be fed via the control net, and so this node can be sacrificed. It can be effectively deleted. And when you do that, you will actually get latents fed from the control net itself, right? Down in here, right? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and undo that at the moment. Sorry, there we go. And move on to the next section, okay? Down below that, there is the select common latent or control net latent, right? If all other things are wrong, go wrong, you can set this to number 1, and it will fill common latent setup from the commons section, which I have off screen at the moment, right? Generally, though, and by default, this is set to 2. So you notice that it's wired right here, right? And you see how it says control latent, right? This input name is specific to the control net stacks, so that if this is missing, right now it's being fed by here, and so the use everywhere nodes will not affect this, right? But if it's missing, if this wire is gone because this is disconnected in some way, or if you delete this, then a control net that's present will feed into this control latent and give you your control or give you your latent size from the control net. And that's controlled by this switch here, whether you want to use the common latent or either this or the presence of a control net latent, right? Over here, we have our sampler title target, which is by default everything. Used to be more important to have this name correct, but once group based execution control came to the use everywhere nodes, it sort of became sort of unimportant, right? So I keep it because there are instances where you might have a very complicated workflow and where you might want to use this extra level of execution control by targeting a specific sampler title. These are titles, right? Just really quick, within ComfyUI in general, these are titles, right? These are groups. These are outputs. And these are inputs, right? So when we refer to input, output, title, group, that's what we're referring to, okay? With that, the group target name is send1. And right now, within Shima, everything by default, meaning when you right-click and you want to choose and send a template to the workspace, they will have this send1 name somewhere within it. And that's so that we can keep execution control within a certain setup of groups, right? So by default, it's this. Technically, you could use other group target names like send to or whatever you want to write here. It could literally be anything, as long as it matches the title of your group here. So what this dot and star means in regular expressions is that basically it will take any amount of characters to the front of this and any amount of the characters after this. So effectively, this is saying if there is the presence of SEND1 anywhere within the title of the group, right, then it will find it, right? So if this said 1A loader SD15 send 1 customized for my own use at the end of it, right? That would still match, right? So you'll end up seeing this a lot, this regular expression a lot, and now you know what it does. Moving on the left-hand side, we have our Loras stack. Here we can turn these Loras on and off, and we can select Loras. We can then also put in model and clip weight for those Loras, which affect the amount of effect that the Lora has on your final image, right? You can leave these set, to something if you want, as long as you remember to turn them off, right? For cleanup, we'll just leave them as none right now. Down below, you will see our positive prompt builders. This is where you will put in your positive and your negative prompts, as well as you can use this builder in order to use a bunch of, presets, right? The coral orange, we'll just add that to it and see what happens, right? You can also do the same down here with your qualities, but it's less useful, to be quite honest, within the negative prompts, because these are obviously things that generally you would want, right? But, maybe not. Maybe you want anatomically incorrect. You want to create some surrealism or something. Perhaps this is something you might use, right, within here. When you select one, it just adds it as a, sorry, there we go. It adds it as a comma/description, right? So we're going to delete that. Okay. Down here are two constants, and these are used throughout the system to do a couple of things. One is the SD15 is used by the workflow image saver. That each time, in fact, you can see it here, it did it just before, this SD 1.5 or SD15 plus setup. This is a workflow image. It's like a sized down version of whatever you are producing on screen, and that happens on, for instance, this sampler down here, right? You put in what you want the workflow to be called, and then you enable it here or disable it, and that is fed from this portion of the loader, right? The other is this 512. This size is used for short side nodes that calculate the size of images based on the shortest side of the size of the image, or rather, what should the shortest size of the image be, right? When you're working with Stable Diffusion 1.5, typically you're going to want it to be 512. On the XL loaders, this will say 1024, right? But technically you could change it, to some other number if you felt like that was giving you the results that you wanted. In the center, we have this ComfyUI styler, and in here you have a whole bunch of options, right? Where you can just click and get different artist styles, different styles for, anime or general art or breast state. I mean, it's kind of insane, to be quite honest, but you can use this to add aspects to your image that you might not want to have to prompt in, right? So when you fill these in, they will kind of combine with your conditioning to affect the final image. Finally, we have our loader, and here we are loading 1.5 Real Cartoon 3D version 13, which is the default that I use, but it's unimportant. It could be literally anything that you want, as long as it is a 1.5 loader. So you'll notice I have my stuff kind of separated into XL and 1.5, and when you use the installer program that we're coming out with, it will also place these downloaded files into the appropriate folder so that you know what to use with it. You can also select different VAEs from here, clip skip options, etc. These feed into down here a wired input pipe. This is if you wanted to, for some reason, connect something by wire. You could do that just by using that and dragging it over to wherever you wanted to go. Like I could fill in here. I could go model and clip and blah blah blah, and it would do the exact same thing. But for the most part, I tend to use use everywhere nodes to make my connections so that I don't have lots of wires. Still, this is a useful item if you want to make something really rapidly or connect something to that is wired only. Some workflow that you've brought in and doesn't have the proper connections to work wirelessly. There is also what we call our multi-pipe. In the multi-pipe basically is it's another pipe node, but one that we created. And by using this, you could drag out an anything everywhere node and target a multi-pipe out on the other side, right? So if I were to do that, right, now we have all these options also leading over to all these options on this side. This, it's a wired option, but what you could do is you could name this, something else. Let's say we'll call this Alderon, right? And down here, we're going to call it Alderon. Whoop. Okay. And if I disconnect this, you'll see that it wires up wirelessly. Right? So this would be a really easy way to get a single virtual wire that contains all of these options for you. Eventually, I may end up joining most of the things in Shima in this way because it's just a very efficient system as opposed to, say, this, where we get, really pretty but sort of distracting amount of connections when we connect things via these individual sends, right? So we're going to go ahead and remove that. And then down here is our logo for this particular loader. Each section within Shima has its own loader, or rather has its own logo. And that logo will change, obviously, from thing to thing, sampler, etc. And then commons looks like so, right? So that is the 1.5 loader. Let's move on to the sampler now.